Well, good weekend evening, YouTubers. Reloading Bench back with you once again, and I thought I would end the series on the Hornady Case Prep Center. As I said in my last video, or a recent video, I talked to Hornady. They're sending out the missing chamfer tool. So in the interim, I'm using the Frankfurt Arsenals. Today's test, or at least what I'm going to demonstrate, or at least try and test, something I haven't done yet, is what I'm going to do process-wise. And I did figure out a better way to, let me see if I can adjust the camera a little better. I did figure out a better way to put this on. I start with the left side, come under, and then over. And that seems to be less, same thing with removing it. That seems to be less violent in terms of how I was doing it before. Well, something something gonna get me. All right, so tonight's test, I did a bunch of 308 that I'd sitting around for a long time. Hang on, let me stop the video because I'm gonna cough. Sorry about that. I need to get some use, and I've had no tea. So those of you who know me, don't be thinking it was the tea. So in any case, I had a whole bunch of 308 from a long time ago that I ran through the decapper and resizer. And because it's rifle, I have, my favorite is to use Imperial wax for my lube. So I took those and then I did the trimming, chamfering, and deburring. And as you can see, it's all gunky. And the reason it's gunky is because, you know, there was lube on the case mouth as well as all over the case. So the short story is all my fingers were full of lube, and I've got lube on here and blah, 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 and lube on the handle and blah, blah, blah. So I thought to myself, all right, maybe I'll try something different for two reasons. One, to see if it makes any difference on what sticks on the case, and there's a reason this case is staying all there by itself. So all of these cases have been resized, lubed, resized, and then tumbled to clean, so that now when I'm picking them up, I don't have a handful of Imperial wax. So I thought to myself, and I'm standing right now, but I was doing this seated, and it was very comfortable. Got it down to a rhythm where everything was one-handed for the most part, where I'm camming it, I'm trimming it, I'm releasing it. So let me go ahead and turn everything on. So 1 second, please. All right, everything's plugged in. A footnote, I did find / discover that, well, two things. One, using the foot pedal was cool for fine tuning, not cool for using too much effort. So I'm back to just turning it off and turning it on. I also have, and as it worked out, my T-track, my T-slot happens to be perfectly aligned with the front and rear bolt holes for the case prep center. So this is on my bench. On my bench, not moving, no rocky. In fact, I'm shaking my whole bench right now. So no rocky, back and forth. All right, so with that, I had it down to a science of one hand pushing it in, camming it, and again, I left this running the whole time. So again, depending on, so I just saw a couple of flakes fly, brass flakes fly. So, and I don't trim it that long. I'm talking and discussing as a point of topic for this. So, as you can see, there's not a whole lot of gunk sticking around that case mouth. There's no brass shavings. There I see one flake. But for the most part, it's pretty clean. This happens to be a lubed case, what I was doing previously. So by doing the same thing, so now I have lube all over the case. Now it's on my fingers. Now it's on here. Now it's going to be on here. It's also going to be on the handle. And that one actually needed a bit there. So the first thing I was noticing last night was a lot more flakage that's the right word. Brass shavings are noticeable in the case mouth, down the throat, and that's because there's lube here. You know, not a big deal, but I was thinking, you know, now I got it all over my fingers. I was thinking from a cleaner operating process that moving forward, I would probably, and again, I would do this seated, I would probably do this with brass that was already tumbled so that I minimize my shavings, or at least the fact that my shavings are sticking to everything. And with 223 and normally with 308, what I would normally do is I would run the case through, at this point, my go no-go gauge to see which cases needed to be trimmed. So instead of trimming every single one of these, or at least going through the process of fake trimming them because they didn't need to be trimmed, I would set them off to the side as ready to load, whereas these, the ones that were definitely in need of trimming, would get trimmed. But I am foregoing that process because this is a new toy and I wanted to get familiar with the new toy. And what better way to get familiar with the new toy? And one of the things I found was because, and I just felt this, so this felt a little jaggedy in the chamfer tool, and I have a split case, split right at the, it's a split that's there, but it's a very minor split. Point being, that's a no-go piece of brass. A lot of times in the past, because of the drill process, the drill operates at a much higher speed. I was not catching some of those as easily. So the other night when I did my first batch of these, I caught, I think, five casings, probably out of, I'd say 100-ish. And I should probably pay attention to what I'm doing instead of looking everywhere else. But again, one-handed process, not because I don't want to use two, but reminds me of the press. There's a lot, like on the Lee press, that I'm doing one-handed. Same thing on the Hornady, not so much on the Dillon, just because of how it's arranged. But I'm finding that this is quite comfortable. Loving the fact that I can smack the crap out of this and it's not moving, so there's no issue with having to make a oak wooden base, although I probably would have liked to have. Don't need to. It wouldn't add to anything, and other than being artistic and taking some time and or costing some money if I don't have the wood. But the nice thing to see is I don't trim my brass, or I don't excessively trim it. I try and trim my brass to the absolute minimum so that, oh, that one, as I just said that, this one happens to be one of the most trimmed pieces. But I tend to keep my brass as close to the spec within a couple thousandths, so I'm not right at the max and I'm not way below the max. And because of what we shoot in terms of bolt and semi, I always do full-length resizing, so that shortens the life of the brass as opposed to just neck sizing it down if it was only shot out of a particular platform. But I'm gonna say I'm digging on this. One, because it takes a lot of the coordinated stress, holding a drill with one hand, either operating it constantly or putting it on a foot pedal, having it at an angle, having to have different bins under my brass, just a different process. My son and I were talking, and I said, when I think about the progression of my reloading journey, 12 years ago, I wouldn't and couldn't have purchased this because, you know, I was very focused on the economics of what it would cost to get into reloading. And I think every reloader thinks about economics in terms of, oh, what's my break even? And for those who actually think in those terms, I'd recommend you don't reload, because I have not ever broken even after 12 years. But if you say, have I enjoyed my journey? I would say absolutely. I love tinkering with the tools. It's just like getting a new pew-pew. You know what they do. Do you really need another pew-pew? Not necessarily. Is it cool to have another pew-pew and try something different? I would say yes, absolutely it is. So this is along the lines of yet another cool reloading tool that does what many of my other tools do, only slightly differently. I don't know if I'd use the term better or worse, differently, but I'm loving the fact that I can use leverage like I'm doing now, instead of force like I have to do with other tools. And hey, worst comes to worst, I take these off. I don't use this at all, and I use the Frankfurt Arsenal, so everything is a vertical down, a push down process, instead of vertical down for the trim, and then, excuse me, push forward for the chamfering and deburring. But yeah, I'm going to say that this is, I'm pretty high on the cool factor. I'm liking it. A little bit of fine tuning, a little bit of adjustment. I re-oiled this mechanism in here, and I have found that that makes things a little bit smoother. So I would imagine that over time that would require some oiling and care and feeding, just like any other mechanical tool does. But yeah, I'm definitely giving this one a thumbs up. But as I said, wouldn't have jumped into this right off the bat. In fact, my first trimmer was the Lee ball and cutter with the trim guide specific to caliber in question, which did the trick. So again, there's so many ways to start out and to get into reloading extremely economically. And I have heard so many people bash Lee. That's unfortunate, because yeah, they are on the lower end in terms of price, but in my opinion, not in terms of quality. And so many people associate price with quality that unless you're paying, you know, $150, $200 for a set of dies, that a $30 to $40 set can't be any good. And I have tried a bunch of different dies from a bunch of different manufacturers, and my Lee dies are the majority, and I don't have any complaints about any of them. So all good. I think you're probably tired of seeing me do the same thing over and over again and ramble on about my reloading journey. So I will bring this to an end with this last piece. But I am going to say I like the cleanliness of doing my lube and decapping, and then tumbling these to get all the lube off, so that I'm doing the cutting, the trimming, the chamfering, and the deburring all on clean, dried brass, as opposed to brass that is full of lube and catches every single flake or brass shaving, to the point where, you know, I would always, after that whole process, tumble anyway. So I'm not saving a step, I'm just rearranging the sequence of the steps. So I'm tumbling before completely finishing. So it's lube, resize, tumble clean, and then do the trimming, chamfering, and deburring. And I'm noticing, at least tonight, that the flakes are going other than remaining on the cutter, because there's no lube holding them or treating them as glue. So it's not a tedious process, time consuming, yes, but that's reloading is a time consuming process. So again, if you're getting into reloading thinking that you're going to save money, I got news for you. And if you think you're getting into reloading because it'll save you time, I got news for you. But if you're getting into reloading because it's a hobby that you enjoy tinkering and trying new things out, that's a win. So there's my philosophy for a Friday night, and I'm going to call this Really cool. Again, wouldn't have bought it years ago, couldn't have afforded it years ago, couldn't have justified it years ago, but I'm at a point in life that it was time for this. And as I was telling my son, it was in the cards because, oh, thank you, the smallest of spiders. Because look at how perfect the alignment is with the T-track. I mean, absolutely perfect alignment. So this is not going anywhere. It's not tilting forward. It's not tilting back. It is locked to the bench, and it's in a perfect location. So in terms of height, when I'm seated and I'm reaching from bin to bin and taking care of bad brass or good brass. So I do agree with my test that dry clean brass is easier to work with on this tool than freshly resized lubed brass with all the gunk on it that gets all over your hands. And I will be cleaning the tool off, but I wanted to leave as is so you could see what was going on. So that is probably it for the Hornady Case Prep Center. Doubtful you will see this again. I'll probably figure out a cover size for it. In fact, maybe I'll leave it in this configuration because 308, although we shoot larger than 308, very rare, and in such small quantities that maybe I do something different by hand as opposed to dinking around with the settings. But we also have a bunch of 223 to do, and 223 is fun as well. That needs to be same process, decapped, lube, decapped, tumbled, and then cut / trim, chamfer, deburr. So that's a win. Good stuff. And I think the only thing I would look for, only improvement, and something magnetic. I've seen people who sell pilot holders, 3D printed pilot holders for other trimmers, and they're magnetic. I don't know if I'd use that because, you know, it'd be vertical. There's not a whole lot of space to do anything. So, you know, maybe I'll make something out of wood, very similar to what I've done with my bullet feeder for when I reload on my Mag-P bullet feeders. Not sure what I'm going to do in terms of how to keep all the tools so that they're, you know, close by, or put something, I don't know, in here. I don't see anything in 3D space because I think the market segment for this particular tool is just too small. It's a high-end tool, high-end price-wise, not high-end functionality. I mean, there's so many other tools that do the same thing for so much less. But again, you know, it fits a great niche, in my opinion, and it was time for it. So went ahead and took the plunge, and I do not regret. So that is the end of the Case Prep Center review. Take care, folks.